Ta-da!
Outstanding. Awesome. So Kimberly, would you like to kick things?
Yeah, so hello. Oh, are we already live on Facebook?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So hello, everyone. I'm Kimberly Graham. I'm a candidate for United States Senate here in Iowa with the goal of repealing and replacing Senator Joni Ernst. I'm really excited about this particular panel here tonight that we're doing this. We're doing a series of virtual events or town halls, forums, roundtables, whatever you want to call them. And tonight is our LGBTQ plus forum. And so we're very excited about that. And I've got some amazing guests here tonight. So if you have questions for me, like particularly about policy not related to LGBTQ plus issues, please always feel free to reach out to me. You can email me directly at kimberly@kimberlyforiowa.com, kimberly@kimberlyforiowa.com, or you can reach us through our Facebook page. I will always personally respond to your questions. But tonight we'd like to keep this kind of on topic as much as we can to the issues at hand. And I'm also very excited that really the person who's going to host this more than me tonight is my campaign manager, Samantha Bucher. Samantha is, to our knowledge, the first openly trans United States Senate campaign manager in the history of histories. So we're very excited to have her and to have her be kind of hosting and leading this town hall tonight. And I will let Samantha go ahead and introduce all the rest of our panelists here tonight. So take it away.
Thanks, Kimberly. So to all of you who are on the Zoom call and all of you who are watching on Facebook, feel free to ask any questions you might have in the chat. And one of our staff will pass those along to us. If you want to direct that at a particular panelist, feel free to do that. If you want to ask them generally, we'll pose them to the group and see who would like to jump in and answer. So the first thing I'd like to do is just let everybody have the chance to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the kind of work that you do in the community, because most of you have either some role at the intersection of the queer community and politics or activism. So if you can just talk a little bit about that and what you do, and the abbreviated life story of what brought you to this point, and share with everybody whatever you're comfortable sharing with them about your journey. I guess we'll start with you, Cody.
Hey everybody, my name is Cody Bauer. I am one of the founding members of our local Pride event in Orange City, Iowa. We're up here in the northwest corner, up in one of the most red counties in the state, if not the most red county in the state. And we've come to really realize how important it is to do a Pride event in a rural community. There's not a place here in rural Iowa and rural America in general that we've found that that people in the LGBTQ community feel comfortable to just be themselves. I keep going back to the same story. I think of every single year. So we're coming up on year 4, by the way. We started in October of 2017. We host a Pride event the 3rd weekend in October every year. And that very first year, back in 2017, on the dance floor, there was a young person who was just standing on the dance floor, on the edge of the dance floor, just beaming. And I know this person's dad, and I turned to this dad and I said, "How are you feeling?" Because we were all so tense, right? We're all super tense. He said, most days we don't know if we're getting out of bed or eating or going to school. And I can't tell you the last time I saw my child smile. And so that story I keep going back to, because that's why we do this.
Yeah, and I when I was up there at OC Pride this year, I actually had the honor to meet a couple of folks that were in a similar boat, and that being being not a native Iowan, being from the South, and in Tennessee, being the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, as we like to call it. It can be really challenging, and I saw a lot of that in the community that you have there, Cody, and it was something that I could relate to a lot. Folks that are in more urban areas don't necessarily see the same challenges, and some have different ones, but it just depends on your zip code, honestly. So, Essie, how about yourself?
My name is Esperanza. People call me Essie for short. I work on the Pride Center board, the Des Moines Pride Center board. And I started off actually just going with my friend because I lived with her, and I just started going because that was our thing that we did Tuesday nights. And then they finally asked me, hey, do you want to be on the board? Because you have, good input and you seem to be interested. And so then I got on the board because I haven't always been into activism. I'm a Christian. And so, it's been hard sometimes, but I'm stepping more into activism, and the Pride Center is helping me do that a lot. It helps with, we help with resources for people in the Des Moines area, and we can reach people outside of the Des Moines area too, because we have a Facebook page and we're working on a website. So just to reach people with resources and a place to come to meet too. We also have people that meet there, so safe space.
Can you say whatever you're comfortable saying about your personal journey? Because I know a couple bits and pieces of it here and there, but
with what?
Oh, and I think in particular the intersection of faith and being in the LGBT community. I think it's a really, really important topic to a lot of people. A lot of people struggle with spiritual trauma and the impact of being disconnected from their families and their communities as a result of their identity.
Yeah, I've been very grateful to find some good friends, because it has been hard for me. I was deep in the church, was going to Bible study and had a whole family in the church. And then when I came out, they kind of slowly faded away. And through places like the Pride Center and other resources and other friends, I've gotten a new family. So it's been really cool to have those places in the community. So yeah.
Awesome. And how about you, Bakari? You want to pitch in?
Can I just say really quickly, I just have to say, everybody, that Bakari was a paid intern with our campaign last summer. And he was the first person that actually, I think, was a paid staffer on our campaign. And Bakari and I spent hours and hours and hours and hours in the car together, driving all over Iowa to go to events all last summer. So I had the great opportunity to get to know Bakari pretty well on a lot of long car rides, and I haven't seen him in a while. So I'm happy to see him again. So go ahead, Bakari.
Yes, thank you. So good to see you. I'm Bakari, like they said, and Kimberly is right. We spent a lot of time together driving across the state of Iowa. And I'm not originally from here. I'm originally from Chicago and Chicago suburbs. And so I got to see parts of Iowa that I never, ever thought that I would ever visit in my entire life, ever. And it was just wonderful and great. I guess outside of this world that we currently live in, I'm a bartender at Bubba Soda & Comforts and a server there as well, and a bar director at Louis Wine Dive on 42nd University as well. So maybe a little different, not as glamorous as some of the other things that the folks on the panelists do, but I'm younger, I'm a recent Drake grad, and so I just kind of have found activism going wherever folks have called me or wherever I felt a need. So just doing some different types of programming and working and volunteering with a couple of organizations or institutions in Des Moines that have found themselves more directly affected with historically and traditionally marginalized communities, and then particularly, of course, the LGBTQ plus community. So like, of course, like Des Moines Public Schools, done some stuff with Iowa Safe Schools, Chrysalis Foundation, PHC, and a project, and just a couple of other things as well. So.
Awesome. And then Representative Bennett.
Hello. Hi. Thank you very much for inviting me to be on the call tonight. I'm State Representative Liz Bennett, and I guess I have had maybe a little less traditional journey towards holding public office than people might think. I'm a 3-term state representative here from Cedar Rapids, and I've been involved with the LGBTQ community for a long time, starting back in high school when the only youth group that we had for LGBTQ folks was one. We had one that was a totally independent organization, independent from schools. I grew up in the Quad Cities, so people from all over the place would come to this one oasis. So it was amazing. You know, from there, I didn't really see myself as somebody who was political, even though I later learned that a lot of the issues that I really cared about are impacted by politics. So I really had a turning point when the Iowa Supreme Court handed down the marriage equality decision in 2009. You know, I was in a long-term relationship with a woman at the time, and all of the sudden, a new kind of future was possible for us. You know, so I decided that not on my watch was I going to allow opponents to pass a constitutional amendment putting hate in our Constitution. So I volunteered on campus, I organized on campus, I became a community organizer with One Iowa after that. And I guess from building that network, you know, that kind of propelled me to my next step of running for office in 2014. So it's been a long ride. It's been really rewarding. It's been kind of a weird thing because when I ran, I wasn't necessarily running specifically on LGBTQ issues. I was really motivated by early childhood education, wages, things like that. Being somebody who graduated from college in the last economic downturn, you know, those things were very much on my mind. And so although I was out, I guess I wasn't super outspoken until I realized how important it was to have representation in the State House. So I started speaking out a little bit more, and I've had the pleasure of meeting teachers, kids, college students, and lots of different people who have said that they didn't really think that they would belong somewhere like the State House. So I hope that not only on policy, but on a personal level, I hope that my work has inspired other people to know that you can run for office and you should.
Awesome, thank you so much. So as far as my story goes, so I as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in rural southeastern Tennessee. In a defunct coal mining town. So it's you know, it was a very interesting upbringing. I was very, very fortunate to end up living while I transitioned in the San Francisco area, and ultimately ended up moving back to my home city of Chattanooga. When I got back, you know, I always knew that the South was a challenging place to be queer. But you know, diving into it a little more headlong, you know, really opened my eyes, especially being someone who was sort of a newcomer to the community at the time. And so I threw myself into activism, joined our Pride organization, started a nonprofit working on lobbying and being a general thorn in the side of our state legislature and our local officials. That is ultimately what led me into working on campaigns. Worked on a congressional campaign back in 2018 in Tennessee, and now I'm working with Kimberly. So, you know, I as Kimberly said, as far as we know, I'm the first openly trans person to manage a federal race at this scale. So, that's been pretty interesting. I honestly, when moving to Iowa, I didn't know what to expect. But I found Iowa to be a very welcoming and affirming place. In particular, I've spent a lot of time out in, just like Bakari did, out in many, many, many areas of the state that, that I never would have expected to see otherwise. So I've probably only been in about half the counties you've been in, Kimberly. That like 87 counties is pretty impressive. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm happy to contribute. And the other thing is what you mentioned, Representative Bennett, about representation is so important. I mean, when I first joined the campaign, I had people in the trans community all over the country reach out to me and say, "Wow, this is amazing. Like you're in this position. Like we didn't think that was something that was possible in this particular climate." And I had at least 2 people reach out to me and say that have not transitioned, reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'm in political science, or I work in the political world, and I feel a little bit safer now coming out and being myself because of this." So that is, if there's one thing, one impact that I've had here, I hope that's the one that sticks with me. So yeah, I would like to, we have a question in the Q&A that we can get to in a minute. And if anybody has any questions on Facebook, on the stream, or anyone else who's on the Zoom has any questions, please do drop them in the Q&A section or in the comments. We'd love to answer any questions that you have. There's 2 really high level topics that I'd love to cover on this call. And that really is primarily the intersections of the queer community, of the LGBTQ community, and different aspects of society. So, like for example, faith in your case, Essie, and race in other ways. We have folks in rural areas like Cody, and folks working in politics like Liz and myself. So I really would like to discuss and explore those intersections. But first, we have a question from Adam Beasley. Adam says, "Me, like many other people, are terrified of our rights being eroded. What policy or action taken by the current administration is the greatest threat to LGBTQIA+ people, and how should we best fight against it?" Well, that's a long list, depressingly. I think I have to say, though, the thing that I think is the most insidious that you're not maybe seeing on the surface is that how intensely they're stacking the courts. A lot of our civil rights conversations are happening in courtrooms and less in legislatures, especially in states that are governed by predominantly rural, predominantly conservative majorities. And so the courts really are that important at a state, federal, and Supreme Court, of course, level. So, and Kimberly, do you want to expand on a little bit about what you know about the stacking of the courts, and because you talk about this a lot in your work?
Yeah, well, it's just that a lot of people sort of think there's just been gridlock for the last 3 years in Congress. Like, oh, nothing's getting done. The House is passing all this great stuff, and it's just sitting at Mitch McConnell's door, and he won't go, let any of it come up for a vote. Well, that's true, but there's been a lot happening in the United States Senate. And what a lot of people don't really know, unfortunately, is that what has happened for the last 3 years is that an unprecedented number of federal judges have been confirmed in the last 3 years. That is pretty much all they're doing in there. And so we're talking hundreds, I believe, I have to look up the current number, but we're not just talking a dozen or a couple dozen. We're talking about hundreds of federal judges. And federal judges are lifetime appointments. Those judges will not leave until they retire or they die or whatever, whichever comes first. And so these are critically important pieces of our democracy and of our system that's supposed to be a system of checks and balances, right, in these 3 distinct branches. But we're seeing at the federal court level, pretty much all of the appointees has come recommended by an entity called the Federalist Society, which is an extremely right-wing, very, very, very conservative organization that vets and recommends extremely conservative judges with extremely demonstrated history of their conservatism and their kind of extreme right-wing decisions that they've made. In some cases, though, it's not based on decisions they've made anywhere else or even their work, because there's been very young people confirmed as federal judges. I'm talking under age 40 here, who've been confirmed as federal judges who've never set foot in a courtroom. So these people are utterly unqualified in a lot of cases. You know, to be blunt, I would almost prefer that we at least hire people that are nominally qualified, right? They've at least been a district court judge or a state level judge. They at least know how you run a courtroom. No, we're not even getting that in some cases. All the qualification is how extraordinarily conservative are you? How interested are you in eroding LGBTQ plus rights? How interested are you in eroding reproductive rights? How interested are you in citing for corporations over workers' rights? And those are the kinds of judges that are being confirmed, hand over fist, like just. So that's what's been going on for the last 3 years, and that damage will not be undone until those people are retired or dead. So we have to, it's even more important that we elect representatives to try to provide some check and balance, right? Because the courts are now packed with all of these extremely conservative judges, and that's not changing. Obviously, more judges will retire, hopefully after the presidency flips in November, and then we'll have an opportunity, you know, to appoint more. But as it stands right now, we have far too many that are sitting there that have been confirmed that are frankly just not even qualified to be there. So.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, taking the Senate back is critically important. But are there any other ways that you know of that we can fight against those appointments or fight against the damage that they will be doing, other than, you know, simply trying to outweigh them in the long run?
No, take back state legislatures, take back state houses, take back governors, you know, seats, which I'm going to be the first one. I just want to let whoever is going to run for governor in Iowa, just want to let you know now, like, sign me up. I will make time to volunteer for you. I don't care if I'm already a US Senator. So this is going to be a critical race. I think that's in 2022. Is that only a couple more years away? Please say that's only a couple more years away. I think Kim Reynolds is going to be up in 2 years. And so we're going to have the opportunity to flip the governor's seat, as well as we will probably be able to take back the House here in Iowa in 2020. And we might even have an outside shot at the Senate, the state Senate. So, you know, and then good old grassroots activism, right? There's always an extreme need for that, because change always continues to happen from the bottom up. It doesn't happen from, you know, we who are sitting in so-called positions of power. It happens with the power from the people. And so that's always going to happen on the grassroots level first.
Awesome. So there's a couple of additional questions too. I want to take them in order they came into. So we've got someone asked on Facebook, Everett, a nationwide conversion therapy ban. We'll really need that in the Senate.
Can I just say first, excuse me, Everett, I never call it conversion therapy. I don't accept that term. I call it conversion abuse. So I call it conversion abuse. And yes, conversion abuse needs to be, we need a federal ban on that. Representative Bennett, where are we with the state ban? I know that Nate Munson and people at Iowa Safe Schools and lots of other people have been working to get a statewide ban. Where was that left, or did that even get taken up this session before you had to adjourn? I mean, before you had to all work from home or whatever?
Right. Well, we've been having conversations on it. Some of the disagreement is happening over a religious exception. So one of the things that we know about what is called conversion therapy, but is actually child abuse, is that already licensed mental health providers licensed physicians will lose their licenses for doing this. So in reality, where this is really happening, you know, are in so-called religious retreats. If you sneak around the internet, you can find a euphemism that is used as spiritual warfare retreats, you know, or spiritual warfare camp. So that's where these things are occurring. You know, we obviously, of course, we want to respect people's religious rights, but we have to start taking a look at when you're doing something that is child abuse, that is abusive and has long-term negative mental health effects on one of our citizens, you know, are you crossing a line there? So some people want to pass a version of the bill that has a religious exemption just to get something passed. Other people don't want the religious exemption in there because then what it basically does is allows people to have a rah-rah session and say that they passed something for the LGBTQ community, but that something doesn't actually address where this abuse is happening. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, and I mean, just to talk about, you know, constitutional protection of people's religious rights, obviously that's critically important. What I think a lot of people sometimes miss, not you here on the panel, but people in general sometimes miss, is that in the United States of America, we're not guaranteed only freedom of religion, we're also guaranteed freedom from religion. And so a lot of people miss the second part and they just focus on the first part. And like so many of our constitutional rights, they must be balanced one against the other, which is why we have courts, which is why the stacking of the courts with super conservative judges is so scary. Because that's when we have a conflict between the right for freedom of religion, let's say, and the right of a child not to be abused, and those rights come into conflict, then what do we decide? How do we decide, right? And that's what judges do. They decide what rights are going to take precedent in that in any given situation. So yeah, anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I think, you know, state bans are really important, especially for children and youth and young queer folks. But there's also sort of just like with many things, there's sort of a shadow that gets cast by not having a federal ban in place, and that is that young adults are also susceptible to this type of abuse. Oftentimes, especially people that are under 21, for example, are still dependent on their families for resources. Maybe they're in college, maybe they're living at home, you know, and that increasingly under the current economic conditions, and God knows with the pandemic, that'll probably even worsen moving forward. You know, that gives parents an incredible amount of control over their children. So you know, an example from my personal life, I once dated someone whose mother found out that we were dating, and she held that over her head and threatened to send her to a camp in Georgia, because in Tennessee there weren't any in our area, but if you go right across the border, you can find one. So, you know, and obviously being an adult, you know, she you know, wasn't like legally obligated to do that, but when you have a roof over your head and food on the table, and you're relying on that for support, you know, and your family is your community to a large degree when you're that young, you know, that can really be damaging. So a federal ban is so important, and I really hope to see that at some point. See, we have a couple other questions. Did anybody else want to comment on conversion abuse before we move on? I didn't want to like prevent anyone from doing so. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, from the Christian perspective, they think they're doing the right thing. That's the crazy thing about it, is they think they're doing the right thing. And if you tell them that it's harmful, they think that it's more harmful to not than to do. So
Right.
it's like, it's hard to reach those people because they think that it's the right thing and they don't understand the harm behind it.
Yeah.
So that's.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you know, I think it's always important, as difficult and almost impossible, or sometimes it may be impossible, to really empathize. You have to understand that for certain people, in their belief system, in their faith, they are harming their child and condemning their child to everlasting damnation, for lack of a better word, if they can't convert their child, if they can't get their child somehow to become straight, to become heterosexual. And so for them, this is like life and death. I mean, in their mind, they think it's life and death for their child. And to be crystal clear, I disagree, a billion%, but that is really what some people believe, and so I think that it's just important to keep, when possible, and that's not at all for me to do. There are plenty of people who I'm sure are trying to do outreach to people in faith communities to help them understand how damaging this is. And they're going to continue to work from that angle. It's going to probably take a lot of this, approaching this from a lot of different angles, to get it ultimately to stop. But the bottom line, and I hope what people eventually come around to, is that every human being wants to be seen and loved for exactly who they are. And so anything that is saying to any human being who you are is not okay, and we need to try to change that, is, on various levels, is going to be damaging to somebody, because that's just the antithesis of human nature. Is we want to be seen and loved for who we are. That's one of our most basic human needs. And so so I know there's a lot of great work being done by a lot of people to try to stop that from happening, and I will certainly be working hard for a federal ban on it. And I think if we flip the Senate and the presidency, I think we'll be in good shape. I think that will not be a very hard, difficult piece of legislation to get passed on the federal level.
Yeah, and that will be very exciting. I mean, a lot of folks don't realize that, federally speaking, and in many, many states, although I believe Iowa has some laws in place around this, there are no civil rights guaranteed to LGBT people. You can, especially where I'm from, again, I'm not familiar with Iowa's laws. Maybe Representative Bennett, you can touch on that, but you can be legally fired. You can be denied service in a place of service, like a restaurant or a hotel or whatever. The latter of which in particular happens quite often in the South. You can be denied housing. You can be denied medical care, which is something I personally experienced. Fortunately, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, insurance companies can no longer discriminate against LGBT people, but that doesn't stop the doctors and hospitals, especially those who have or who are faith-based from doing so, which is predominantly, especially in certain parts of the country, the case. So, and what that leads to is really a truly devastating impact on the community. In particular, I know the statistics among trans people, something like 41% of trans people will attempt suicide at some point in their lives. The average, I believe the average income for trans people is something like $29,000 a year. So the impact, the outcomes on health, the life expectancy, I believe, is somewhere in the late 40s, and I believe for trans women of color in particular, that drops to the mid 30s. So the impact on people, and that's for no reason other than the systemic discrimination that exists. The true impact and the outcomes that happen as a result of these systems and these policies that we have in place really do meaningfully impact people's lives and harm them in so many different ways. So we have another question, and I think this is maybe for Kimberly. In light of what's happening with the courts, what is your position on a court packing strategy to help even things out?
Well, as far as just the regular rank and file federal courts, there's not really much we can do except do our best to fill as many federal, judgeships when they come open, when we've got Democrats in control of the Senate and presidency. So, I mean, that's what we can do as far as trying to write that a little bit, or even that out, or just get more judges into federal office who are qualified and who have not taken extreme right-wing positions that harm people's civil rights. As far as the Supreme Court goes, there's been some talk about the possibility. I've heard various presidential candidates talk about this during the presidential campaigns, about increasing the size of the United States Supreme Court so that we can appoint, when there's a Democratic Senate and president, we can appoint more, have the opportunity to appoint more justices during that time period. I, to be honest, just haven't looked into all the details of that and how feasible that really is. But that's certainly one option that might be open. And my understanding is there is no hard number of Supreme Court justices that there must be. So it's, possible that there could be an expansion of the United States Supreme Court and more justices appointed than the number than we currently have.
And then Representative, did you want to comment on the state of Iowa civil rights legislation?
I did. I'm so happy you asked about that, because this is one of the things that makes me so proud to be an Iowan. It's also something that I gloat about to other legislators who think they're awesome, but don't step to Iowa, because guess what? We have protected sexual orientation and gender identity in our civil rights code since 2007. So that's 13 years. And I think it's something that is an example of Iowa values. It's an example of kind of our quiet, steady march forward in the state, towards including more and more people. Now, I would caution people, we have seen bills this past year to remove sexual orientation and gender identity from our state civil rights code. So going back to what we were talking about before with what people can do, at every level, you need to make sure that any elected official knows that you care about these issues. Because guess what? People who run for town council or county supervisor or school board or anything today run for Congress, maybe in 5 years. So they need to know that you are watching, you care about this issue, and that they need to support you on these issues as well.
Awesome, thanks. Let's see, we've got a couple more questions. So there's two that are very similar, so I'm gonna address them both. I think maybe Representative Bennett, you and I can both tackle these. So the first one is from Bailey. Bailey asks, what advice would you all give for a young adult or anyone who wants to become more involved in LGBTQ activism and advocacy? So let's you've been quiet, Cody. Why don't I kick that to you?
No problem. So what I would, what I would say is start by telling your story, right? Let people hear what your story is, what your journey has been like. If the world has not been good to you because you're in the queer community, talk about that, right? Let people know, like, hey, this has been my experience. This has been, these are the things I've had to deal with. And then second is, as an educator, I feel like education is a huge piece for me, right? Help people understand what these laws, how these laws impact your life, right? And not just how you're treated on the street, but the Civil Rights Act in Iowa, right? That really affects people's lives, right? That allows people to keep a job or to not get evicted from their apartment.
Awesome. And Bakari, do you want to weigh in on how to get involved in LGBTQ activism?
Sure. I would probably say that, and I think many of the people on the panel can agree with me, that one of the best things about the LGBTQ plus community is community itself. Like, the whole idea is togetherness and community, right? So what I really like to do, or what I really have done over the years, is kind of look in my community and look at some of the people that I'm like really looking up to, and just kind of like tagging along with them. So I've done that, I guess, throughout the years, just trying to do organizing events with different folks that I really look up to. Somehow getting in contact from someone that I found community in with, who knew Kimberly Graham, to then work on her campaign for United States Senate, and just kind of looking at even like as simple as something as like Facebook friends. Because you can tell when there's community if you literally are looking at someone's Facebook friends and then all of a sudden they have the same type of little circle. I want to be with that group, or I want to know more about them, or I want to volunteer with what these people are doing. I want to start working with them just so I can know more. And so I guess the way that I kind of thought about the question is not necessarily how can I get a bill to be passed, but how can I just decide to involve myself more and kind of further community, because it's all about inviting people in, and then of course going out and reaching out into your community. So I just think that's a little thing that I love to do. It's an idea that we use with other like walks, like LinkedIn is literally just the same thing but with jobs. And so
Yeah, that really resonates with me, actually. You know, there's the old defense. We don't all know each other, but then if you
it's literally not even true. Yes. Really, every time I look at someone and I'll look at a like retweet or something like that I'll see on Twitter, and then it'll literally say Liz Bennett, Kimberly Graham, Nate Monts, and all these people liked this tweet, and I go, okay, so I know that I don't know this person, but I know this person, and so I'm gonna figure out how I can know this person.
Yeah, I feel like I said to my partner once, like when we moved here, she's like, "Where's the queer community?" And I said, "Oh, just find one, you'll find the rest. Don't worry."
Yep.
So anyway, that's true for sure. Essie, did you want to add anything on the getting involved in activism front?
Mine kind of happened super organically, so I don't know. I just kind of, like I said, I just kind of started going with my friend, and then I kind of just got asked because they could see my passion. So I don't know. That's a way to go too. Just insert yourself.
Half the battle almost in everything. I mean, even in the political side, people ask me, how do you get involved in political campaigns? And I said, well, have you tried volunteering on one? Really, truly, that is the way. I mean, we have some volunteers that started, making phone calls, and now they're managing aspects of the campaign. So, it truly does, it works the same way in the LGBT community. And then this next question, I'm going to direct squarely at you, Representative Bennett. It's from Adam. Adam asks, what do you have to say to LGBTQIA people who may want to run for office?
Oh, I love it. That's such an important question. I would say first, go out, get involved. The Victory Fund has some great trainings. So Google the Victory Fund and get connected with them. Your voice is really important. In 2009, I was at the Equality March, the National Equality March in DC. And I went to a panel with the head of the Victory Fund at that time, and Kirsten Sinema. And so one of the key, ideas of the Victory Fund is that even working together with an LGBTQ person in the halls of the legislature or Congress or the Senate can change the way these conversations are had. Knowing people as your colleague can change the way some of this policy goes. So absolutely run for office, take advantage of candidate trainings. So one of the other things, so a lot of times people think that to run for office, you have to be like an MBA or like a lawyer or something like that. We love those folks. That's great. But what I always recommend people to do is do the thing
that you are excellent at. Because then when you go to run for office, you can allow people to draw on your excellence. So definitely diversify, get involved, volunteer on campaigns and other stuff like that. But I think it's really important to do the thing that you're excellent at. And that can help a lot of people know you and see how great you are.
Thank you. I would also recommend some resources that would be that could be helpful. There's something called the National Democratic Training Committee. They have amazing training. If you plan on running for office yourself, or if you want to work on campaigns, that's a really great resource. If there's a Republican equivalent, I don't know about it, and you shouldn't run for a Republican seat anyway. So, yeah. I think I think it's really important. And I mean, the representation is really critical. And I think, we saw, not only did we see a large wave of women moving into positions of power and taking office in 2018, but we also saw a huge wave of LGBTQ folks running and taking positions and seats in various levels of office. So, I think the more political power our community amasses, the better off we're going to be. There's a question that I would like to address. So from a different Liz. Liz says, Donald Trump recently stated that it was fine for healthcare providers to choose not to treat trans folks for COVID-19 based on their gender. What can we do at the federal level to prevent that kind of discrimination? Can we get rights legislation at the federal level that would prevent this? So like I said a little bit ago, actually, I've had a personal experience like this, not with COVID-19, but actually with pneumonia. So a few years back, I went to a walk-in clinic. I was an asthmatic growing up, so I knew how important it was to not get pneumonia and die. So I went to get that checked out, and the doctor at the walk-in clinic. Hi, Liz's dog.
Sorry.
You're fine.
You're fine.
The doctor.
I thought it was Hazel.
No, she's being quiet. So the doctor at the clinic, my name had not been changed yet at the time legally, and so the doctor at the clinic could see that on my chart, and when he made the connection in his head, he just straight up refused to treat me and told me that I'd have to go somewhere else. So that is something that happens, more often than you might think. I mean, it happened to me. As far as the kinds of things we can do to prevent that kind of discrimination, there's two tracks that we can take. One, either a legislative track where we specifically write in gender identity and sexual orientation into federal civil rights legislation, like the Federal Civil Rights Act. Or the second track, which is something that a lot of people depend on right now, is the interpretation of existing civil rights legislation to extend the idea of sex or gender to sexual orientation and gender identity. So that basically means that, let's say Cody goes and gets married to a woman, and his boss at work is like, "Cool, great, here's a wedding present, yay!" Let's say that Cody goes and gets married to a man, and then his boss at work fires him. The difference between those two situations is Cody's sex, Cody's gender. And so that's the argument that's being made in the courts related to that. And so that's a bit shaky, though, and the Trump administration has, in fact, attacked that at all levels. Various courts are attacking that principle. So it's kind of a patchwork, and we truly need a federal sweeping civil rights legislation to add gender identity and sexual orientation, because that's the only way that we're going to truly solve this problem. I mean, as I think, Kimberly, you said once or twice, sometimes you just can't leave it up to the states to figure things out on their own.
Hey, everyone, don't we have some pending legislation that could help all of this? Isn't that sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk?
The Equality Act.
Yeah.
Awesome. So
it's ready to go. It's just waiting for the Senate to be flipped.
I'll let you take the next one in Q&A, Kimberly, since it's specifically like a policy question for you.
Sure. So hey Kyla asks, this is an issue that affects many LGBTQ plus people, especially trans people. Would you support sex work between consenting adults decriminalization? So the kind of quick answer, I'm horrible at non-nuanced answers, because one thing you learn when you get to be the ancient age of 55 is that things are not black and white. There are a lot of shades of gray. So the quick answer is sure, yeah, I would support decriminalization. I mean, two consenting adults want to, whatever, fine. But to me, the deeper issue here is multi-layered, and this there's a lot of different facts that can come to bear on the situation, depending on the facts of the exact situation we're talking about. Because my concern, coming from someone who's been an advocate for abused and neglected kids for 20 years, is that surely, again, I'm making assumptions here as someone who is not trans and does not do sex work. I'm making an assumption here that sometimes, not always, people that are doing sex work are doing it out of desperation, meaning they don't have a lot of other good options to survive. And that should not be in our country. It should not be that someone does something that they maybe don't really want to do, but they don't have other opportunities, that there are no other ways for them to survive. And when we talk about, well, when someone says, I'm consenting to do that, I want to do sex work, that's what I want to do. Again, this is all part of a hugely nuanced conversation. Yes, I would decriminalize it, and not but. Is somebody really consensually wanting to do that? Or, do they not have other options? And what is their own history been in their own life that has led them there? And so, and how old are they? Are they a day after 18, or are they 35? Like, all of this to me, all of these pieces of the puzzle matter to me, because I don't think that this is, like, for me anyway, this is not just sure, yeah, next question. It's a more nuanced conversation than that for me, because I want to make sure that people are mentally well, physically well, and that people are doing things from as truly sort of freely voluntary place, as possible. So I don't know if that addresses it. If anybody else wants to chime in, who knows a lot more than me, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the central issues there is the way that policing plays into that, right? Because a lot of the obviously in context of the nuanced conversation, a lot of police officers will use that as a vehicle for their own discrimination, their own bias against trans people and LGBT people. And I think also, that's a big piece of it. And I also think that, part of the reason that so many trans people have so many poor outcomes and why our life expectancy is so low is being forced into that. I mean, I think obviously sex work is just as diverse as any other profession, if you will. Like, there's many ways to do it. But like Kimberly mentioned, I think keeping people safe and healthy, making sure they have opportunity and options is the most important thing. And civil rights legislation to make sure that people can't be fired or refused a job just for being trans would go a long way to helping close that gap. So I think that's where we need to start on those two sides.
I think that if I can just jump in,
Yeah.
I think, like, what I hear maybe you saying, Kimberly, is just like, in order to stop harm from coming to a person, if decriminalizing it looks like that person isn't going to be put in places where they can be harmed, then that is an okay thing. But it's just not as you can't just decriminalize it and think like for many different things that is then going to help maybe an affected community, because many things are not legal now. Many things it is illegal to discriminate based upon many different things. It's illegal to harm people based upon many different things. And we know with our policing system, like you said, Samantha, like it still happens daily. So there's always like a yes and, not a yes but, or something like how you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, are there any more questions that anybody who's connected here in the Zoom has? We've got a few comments on Facebook that I'd love to read to you guys. So Stacy Walker says, Kimberly Graham is an inspiration. I can't wait to vote for her. And he also says, also Liz Bennett is a legend.
We got our Stacy Walker fan club. That's cool.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, we are coming kind of close to the end of the time that we have scheduled for this. I guess I just want to give everybody the opportunity to say something, give a closing statement, if you will, to members of your community. What would you say to the world on the platform that you're standing on right now, Cody?
I have a quick question that I'm maybe, I don't know, I'm new to the political world, so so Iowa is an at-will state. So does that mean that we'd have to be not an at-will state in order to get that passed, or can we still be an at-will state and have that, like the discrimination for hiring and firing LGBTQA could still be a thing in an at-will state? Does that make sense?
I think so. Tell me if I'm getting this right. So you're saying that somebody in Iowa can be fired for any reason or no reason. That's called at-will employment, right? Or so-called right to work, which, by the way, I want to try to get a federal ban on that too. So you're saying, can they fire you for being LGBTQ plus because we're an at-will state? So the answer is no, because an at-will doesn't mean, while we say it can fire you for any reason or no reason, there still are protected classes or protected population. So for example, even though we're an at-will state, somebody cannot fire you because of your religion. Somebody cannot fire you because of your race. Like there's protected, constitutionally protected classes or people, sorts of people, or I'm not thinking of my words right now. I need to go back into my constitutional law class in my head. But so no. So if there were, the problem though that we run into though is Iowa. So Iowa currently does have, Iowa state, the state of Iowa has protection for LGBTQ plus people, but we don't have that on a federal level. So there's some states, not Iowa, there's some states where you absolutely could be fired for being LGBTQ plus. Like that could be the reason. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean I think like the subtext of the question was, can they just fire you and say it was for some other reason, but actually be discriminating against you? Totally. I mean that
sure. Yeah, of course they can give that a shot. Yeah.
And that kind of like insidious, underhanded discrimination is the harder type to beat. But I mean, oftentimes culture follows legislation, culture follows law. And so I think making those changes at a federal level, pushing our society in that direction is kind of how we prevent those things from happening in the future. But yeah, your final closing statement to your community, starting with Cody.
Hey Cody, before you start, can I ask you real quick before you start?
Anything.
Can you just give us like the Reader's Digest version of, wasn't there kind of some, if I'm remembering right, some controversy surrounding last year's, can you give us the short version of that story and where that stands right now?
There's always controversy here. I feel like, so I think maybe I'll just combine this because I felt like this is leading well into my closing statement, if you will. I feel like we're very much still on the front lines of equality, of the fight for just like basic equality in rural America, right? So so this is an area where it's really unsafe to be out for a lot of people, right? Even inside of their own family, because that means that you may not have a home, you may not have friends, you may not have food. So there are actually a lot of groups that we've connected with as an organization that will help people find a home, if it's temporary or permanent, or there are just a lot of kind of things like that are happening all the time. Kids are getting kicked out of their homes for coming out to their families. So sorry, I'm gonna rewind back to your question. What happens when you have a pride in a community that is as conservative as this community is, there's a constant struggle, there's a constant battle of really loud voices trying to find a way to shut it down, basically. So there was in February of last year, not 2020, but 2019, there was an ordinance passed with the city that changed their conduct policy in city facilities, and we rent city facilities for our Pride events. And so 2 days prior to the event that the city officials were going to have an issue with, they contacted us and let us know, hey, we believe that your event is going to violate the city this conduct policy. And so we had a little court case, and we were not issued an injunction because there wasn't they didn't say we will stop you, we will shut you down. But there was that last year that currently is that currently is unresolved. We're still I was sending messages back and forth earlier today, actually, with the group who organizes the event, to say, hey, do you think maybe we should be preemptive and talk to the city in advance this year and say, hey, we want to make sure that you're not going to pull anything on us this year. And last year, so not last year, in 2018, there was a guy that checked out books from the local library and burned them in protest of our event. So it's always there's always something. In 2019, we had a guy running for mayor solely on his campaign. His entire campaign was to shut down Pride, basically. So it just goes back to what you were saying earlier, Kimberly, about people are really concerned about the souls of their children, right? And I think so that's why it's such a big deal here. So that's what I have for you.
Yeah, anything you want to add, like positive reaffirming messages of awesomeness to your community?
Sorry, I missed that, Samantha.
Sorry, I was saying, is there anything you'd like to add, like a message to the community at large, personal?
Don't stop showing up. Keep being you. Keep coming to events. Don't let people who disagree with you silence you.
Awesome, thanks. And Essie, your turn. Anything you'd like to say?
I'm a big kid, so I just watched the new Trolls movie and it had a really good message. And so I don't know, that is my encouragement, is like differences are a good thing. And so if you're different, like Cody said, like don't hide it, it's a good thing. People need your difference. So yeah, that's all I got.
Awesome.
Bakari?
I guess just this last little section here has just really made me think kind of, I guess, about the balance of, I guess, the souls of our community versus just the physical, real life, like bodies that are in our community. And I, of course, definitely, I think that both are just like important. What this, our world right now has, I guess, taught me about is that I just don't think that post, whatever post, I guess, a directly affected daily life of COVID-19 looks like, we just kind of maybe have to do things differently. I think it's like, we just know that wherever we just were prior to, I guess, March just was a place, and now this is happening, and now we need to just be different afterward. And so I'm just really have been thinking about lately, healthcare tied to occupation. And of course, Kimberly, right, you have been thinking about that every day. I've heard you talk so much about healthcare, and just a single payer universal system. And so that is just really important to me in terms of like souls of communities, but like lots of people don't have healthcare right now because lots of people don't have jobs, but lots of people didn't have healthcare prior to losing jobs anyway. And so what we do with the health of our LGBTQ community. And then I guess just like related to that, just the Midwest is very interesting, I guess, our intersections and pockets. And so just really thinking about how we address just the bodies here in Iowa. We've got some interesting statistics, and so just our souls versus our physical life bodies, both are important. We really need to address them both.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the quarantine or the COVID-19 situation. You know, I was talking to a friend back home, checking in with them, and they're trans as well. And I said, hey, how are you handling the quarantine? And she said to me, oh, it's just an average Tuesday. That is to say that you know, for a lot of trans people and a lot of queer people, you know, not actually a whole lot different from what regular lives are like, because, you know, whereas here we're afraid of a virus, on a daily normal basis, we might be coming to harm.
Mhm. Sounds like a lot of privilege to me, but that's, you know, this is my take on it.
Yeah. And how about you, Representative Bennett? Any message that you'd like to leave with?
You know what? I would just like to thank my community. You know, I've been in Cedar Rapids for 18 years now, and I've had the privilege that most of the time I've been able to be open and to be myself. And people gave me a chance to run for office, and my constituents have supported me in taking bold stances, not just for the LGBT community, but for other communities who really are not heard a lot of the time. And the only reason I can do that is because people here are supporting. So I just want to give appreciation, you know, to folks for that. As well as, you know, just a shout out, you know, to our folks who might not be living in a place that is as accepting. I just want you to know that it's not just me fighting for you at the Capitol. It's every single member of my Democratic caucus. We have your back, and, you know, if it does come to battling some horrible legislation, we will go to the mat for that. But remember that it's not all dark skies. We did actually pass a bipartisan gay and trans panic bill through the state house this year. So there are definitely some bright spots as well.
Yeah, I saw that, and well done. I think what I'd like to leave folks with is, I'm going to mute you, Bakari, because you're echoing for us. Sorry.
Okay.
So I think what I'd like to leave you guys with is this. This fight has been going on for decades before us, centuries even, and is going to go on for decades after us. You are living in a time where you have the ability to do things and the rights to do things that you maybe wouldn't have had even 5 or 10 years ago. If you had asked anyone in the trans community, for example, 5 years ago, if they would be sitting here, they would have laughed at you openly. If you'd asked anyone in the LGBT community if they would ever hold political office, 30 or 40 years ago, they would have laughed at you openly. It would have been so ridiculous to think that that would ever happen. So we've made some gains, we've had some wins, and the fight's not over. You know, just because marriage equality passed doesn't mean that everybody gets to go home and sit in their laurels. Even though that's the you know, inclination of some folks. But I think, you know, we have a lot of work ahead of us, but also don't forget to, you know, take pride, not to use a bad pun, but take pride in the work that's already been done, and remember your history as a community, and connect with the people around you from a safe social distance. And you know, and just stay strong through this. And I think, you know, like you said, Representative Bennett, I'm sure there are a lot of folks, a lot of kids, a lot of youth that are in quarantine with their families right now, going through a lot of suffering. But this pandemic too will end, just like everything else. So if you can stick it out, stay with us, we'll get through it together. Anything from you, Kimberly?
Yep. I just wanted to mention as another resource for, now this is a woman-specific resource, or for anyone who self-identifies as a woman. So it is not just restricted to women, biologically women at birth. The Emerge Iowa program is an excellent 6-month training program for Democratic women or self-identified women who want to run for office. And I believe they're planning to start, they were going to start a training class right around this time, and they've moved the start date, I think, to sometime in June or July. So if anyone wants information on that, they can contact our campaign and I'll get information for you. I went through that 6-month candidate training program and it's excellent. And the other thing I just want to say is, if anybody's watching this or watching the replay sometime, I have a 20-year-old son, Max, and as a mother, this always gets me so emotional. I cannot imagine not loving my son 100 million %, no matter what, ever. Like, for me, that is my child's sexual orientation or preferences makes zero difference to the way I feel about my child. And I have long told my son's friends that if any of them don't have a mom-ish figure because their parents have rejected them, that my inbox and my text is always open. And I've met in person with some young people over the years who needed and wanted a momish figure. And that invitation is always open to anyone. So you can always send me an email at kimberlyforiowa.com, or Facebook us or whatever. And I'd be happy to listen to you if you have parents that don't listen to you. I think that's all I want to say. I'm just super grateful for all of you to be here. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for supporting the campaign. Thank you, Representative Bennett. For those of you, probably you all know who are here, but for those who don't know, Representative Bennett recently officially endorsed our campaign, and I am super excited about that. So that's awesome. And there's been so much positive feedback and messages I've gotten about that. So I think that's really helped us to get our message out there, and I'm really grateful. So I think that's it. Keep doing everything you're doing. And do you have anything else, Samantha?
Yeah, I do. So obviously we are talking about LGBT issues, but we're also running an election campaign. So I would urge all of you to find 5 of your friends and make them go to kimberlyforiowa.com/vote. That's kimberlyforiowa.com/vote. Because you don't have to go stand in a long line on June 2nd, 6 feet away from each person around you and touching all the same pens and all the voting booth materials as everyone else. You can, in fact, vote by mail. And the Secretary of State has sent to every registered voter a form that will allow you to request a vote by mail or absentee ballot. We have a great system on our website at kimberlyforiowa.com/vote that will actually let you check your registration and find out what you need to do to vote. I would strongly encourage that you vote for Kimberly, but whoever you vote for, please vote. The pandemic doesn't stop the wheels from turning, and it certainly is not stopping people like President Trump, Senator Ernst, and Governor Reynolds from doing their damage to our community and others. So if there's ever any time to do it, it's now. So please do.
Yep, and you can vote now. And yes, a political candidate is saying to you, don't go vote on June 2nd, because
Yeah.
I don't want you out there, and there's no reason for you to be out there potentially endangering yourself and your loved ones. So we've got quite a bit of time, what, about 38 days or something until June 2nd. So your absentee ballot request will come in the mail, fill that out, send it in. They'll send you a ballot, fill that out, send it in. Oh, and it's already stamped. You don't even have to buy a stamp. This is all postage paid. So just send it in and then you'll be done voting.
So yeah, that's kimberlyforiowa.com/vote. And if any of my equally impoverished LGBTQ community members feel like kicking a couple bucks our way, that also really helps. You know, we've had a really hard time with fundraising due to the pandemic, just like everything else. And then finally, we always need volunteers. You know, we have the most volunteers of any of the Senate campaigns, and we're really proud of that. You know, we have a really diverse group of staff and volunteers, and we're, you know, contacting hundreds of thousands of voters in the state of Iowa. So we need your help to do that. So you can go to kimberlyforiowa.com/volunteer/vote and /donate to do those things respectively. So without further ado, I hope you all have a good night. Stay home, stay safe, and stay well.
Thanks, everybody. Bye. Stay well.